Fella Radio. Slava Ukraini.
I'm going to just do a really quick timestamp if that's okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm just going to put this out really quick. It is Thursday, January 16th. It is 11 p.m. in London, 1 a.m. on the 17th in Kyiv, 3 a.m. in Tbilisi, and 7 a.m. in Perth, Western Australia. Then we'll go back to the 16th, and it is 6 p.m. in New York City and 3 p.m. in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon. So now you know where everybody is in the world as far as what their time may be. And like I said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is good to see you, Alex, and good to see you, Cranky Canuck. And you guys will get her going as soon as you're ready.
We will. We'll also have Fella WhoBonks joining us shortly to come up and be a co-host as well. And hello, everybody. It's been a while. It's been about 4 months now since I've been on the air, and it's nice to get back. A little bit rusty here. I've been kind of shaking off all the cobwebs, but we should have a good show for you tonight. We've got Cranky Canuck on here. As you know, Cranky Cartoons does a lot of political commentary, especially in regards to disinformation, and with a bit of a focus on Canada. We are going to be talking a little bit more about Canada today than a normal call would be, but that's just because we both happen to be Canadians, and we both happen to really watch this info space in kind of a big way. So, Cranky, welcome. You want to tell everyone a little bit about what you're all about?
Yeah. Well, I'm a political satire cartoonist. I enjoy bonking people as well as breaking down disinformation everywhere I can. And I got into breaking disinformation down with cartoons and humor. And one of the reasons why I do this is that I remember a long time ago, if you remember, there was a movie called Monsters, Inc. And the monsters loved collecting their energy for their world via scaring little children. But they found in the end that it was far more powerful to make people laugh. And one of the hallmarks of fascism is their kryptonite is laughter and humor. So I want to humorize all that I can of these people, point out the foolish things that go on with it, and try to add a little bit of light in the darkness for everyone else.
And it works very good. Your cartoons are hilarious.
Thank you, sir.
They're pretty informative too, which is great. And I'm happy to get you on the show tonight. Now we're planning on talking about a bit of a heavy topic tonight, which is not unusual for Signal and Noise. We tend to get into a few pretty deep things on this segment because it's a rather unpleasant topic for the most part. But what are we talking about tonight, Cranky?
Well, we have echoes of the past from Germany 1939 to America 2025, and it seems as though we're living beside the what looks like could potentially become the Fourth Reich, and I don't think nearly enough people are worried about this and taking it seriously. So one of my focuses moving forward in 2025 is going to try to help people wake up to the fact that America may not necessarily be our friend much longer, as they're filling up all of their institutions with oligarchs and loyalists to Donald Trump. And this is not going to look well for Canada. So far, it looks like we have the Canadian Team Canada and the premiers and our current prime minister all speaking out against this. And we have one premier who has decided to lick the boots of Donald Trump, Danielle Smith, as she has managed to screw up her province, as it is absolutely so dependent on oil that she has, in her mind, no choice but to keep selling oil to the U.S. Against the needs of the rest of us. We need to stand together. So this is a really big deal right now, where Alberta could potentially secede or break from what Ottawa demands that they do, because we have to stand united, and ununited will fall. So this is not good. We're in a very bad place in Canada, and Alberta seems to be, the fertile ground for causing more destruction and problems with what's going on. We saw last week that Kevin O'Leary, Jordan Peterson, and Danielle Smith went down to kiss the ring. And I'll just say off the bat, Kevin O'Leary is a billionaire oligarch of Canada. And Jordan Peterson is a alt-right thought leader, if you'll call it that, a disgraced psychologist. No one in Canada has elected them to speak for us, but Kevin is down in Mar-a-Lago, and it's been said that he has told Trump to disregard what Trudeau has to say. And that in itself is a treasonous act. He's not allowed to just go speak for the rest of us because he has money. So things are happening, and it seems to be happening at a rather breakneck speed. So I'm pretty worried, and I think we should start on that. There's a lot of parallels that we can talk about.
So, just for context, Trump has gone ahead and voiced his opinion that he believes that the United States should take control of Panama and Greenland, as well as Canada. And he has, for all the comfort it should give us, said, no, no, we don't plan to use the military to take Canada. We're just going to use economic warfare to take over Canada. But Greenland and Panama are both on the table to be invaded. And as has been said many times before, Donald Trump is not some sort of super genius that's playing 4D chess. He genuinely tries to accomplish the things he says he wants to, usually fails because of incompetence. But he does give it a shot and actually tries to do it. So that is a very open and present threat to Canada at the moment. And it is something that we do need to take a look at. And so you said you wanted to take a look at some historical combinations or some historical examples. Let's start talking about that. How do you see this fitting with the same sort of Weimar Germany 1930s?
Well, maybe we should just start with the dehumanizing rhetoric of Trump, his language using things like vermin, poisoning the blood of of America, echoes Hitler's dehumanization terms and targeting opponents and minorities to justify exclusion and violence. And this seems to be okay with a lot of people. I don't believe that he won that election fair and square, but I'm not going to go on at that. But there's still millions of people who voted for this kind of person that uses this kind of language to divide and destroy the thin veneer that we call democracy.
So a good example of that would be where they were talking about, I forget what the city was, but they were talking about immigrants eating dogs and cats.
Oh,
Was
yeah.
a humanizing thing that they did recently. Yes, absolutely referring to people as vermin. And Trump's been pretty clear that he considers people who disagree with him the enemy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. He's employed similar tactics using dehumanizing language to describe his political opponents, marginalized groups, referring to immigrants, and all of that. It's creating societal polarization. It's legitimizing violence, and it's eroding democratic values. And the spillover effects from America, as much as everybody likes to think we're isolated, we're not. The American media comes right into Canada and has been radicalizing our citizens and causing this kind of stuff to spill over and take a normally peaceful country and making people behave and act poorly and becoming the worst versions of themselves.
I couldn't agree more there. I personally live within about 1,000 meters of the U.S. border, so it's very close to home for me. Uh, we got a hand up. Someone who comes up fairly regularly. I'd love to hear what she has to say. Lexicon, do you have a question for us?
Hi, guys. Well, pleased to meet you all, and nice to hear about this segment. And so we got all these Canadian accents going down. I never understand what it is, but when I hear Canadians, I know. and and I'm one. I don't know what it is because in the movies nobody ever gets a Canadian accent right. They think it's English or something, which it isn't. And I don't know what it is. But at any rate, feels at home. Well, I like your topic. And I just want to say, for my sins, watched a bit of Rand Paul so called questioning Marco Rubio in some hearings and they're having this jolly discussion on how there has to be compromise on both sides. They're discussing diplomacy like these two guys know anything, and um, and so I'm thinking to myself. Like, have these guys ever I realize they're relatively young from my elderly vantage point, I'd have to say that, but so clearly they haven't watched enough movies, they don't know enough about history, but what compromises would they have, proposed to Hitler? I mean, like, do they understand when Western leaders, well, the Allied leaders decided that it was unconditional surrender, and why did they decide that, and what was at stake? And if they had decided that diplomacy required compromises, what would that have meant for the carving up of the world? I mean, there was a disgraceful carving up in any case, but so what they're proposing is to go along with this. They want the new, well, Putin wants a new Yalta, right? Nobody mentions anything like this in these juvenile kindergarten level discussions that are going on in these hearings, unfortunately, in the US Congress for the new cabinet upcoming. But so Putin wants to have a new Yalta, and they'll just carve up the world, and they'll give this half of Greenland, along with all of Canada to the and Panama to the American sphere of influence, and they'll take the other half plus Ukraine for their sphere of influence. And I guess that would be mean Transnistria, Moldova, and Romania as well, for starters, and the Baltics, of course, and bits of Nordics. So I wish somebody in those hearings would talk a little bit of history to these guys and ask them why. Why was the watchword unconditional surrender? And what does it mean when you decide what's going to be your approach to the adversary in this conflict? Because what they're proposing is some puerile notion that we're grown-ups. We understand diplomacy. Diplomacy, it's like I don't know if they're running for student council president. So we understand diplomacy. Diplomacy, it's easy. It means that each side has to compromise. So Hitler gets a part and we get a part. Is that what that means? And that's how much you've learned in your life. And that's what you're putting yourself forward for, to be leaders of these various cabinet positions in the American government. I don't know. They're sure selling their country short, and they're busy selling all of NATO and all of the allied countries supporting Ukraine short. It's
So
astonishing,
I can
but
address this
nobody
question.
is mentioning it. Okay, back to you.
So
Thanks.
it's easy to address this question. The thing is that people like Marco Rubio are bought into the lies already, and he's already a Trump loyalist. He understands exactly where this is going, or he is far too dumb to be in that position. That's possible too. The Americans have voted in a few real gems. I'm looking at people like MTG, and but he's complicit. Cranky, go ahead. You're essentially co-hosting with me. You don't got to put your hand up.
Well, I just, I don't want to interrupt, but I would call this WWE diplomacy. We've actually taken the function of how wrestling works with telling narratives and stories and bad guys and good guys, and they are now applying it to diplomacy because it works. This also helps scramble the disinformation, makes it entertaining. I think a lot of people actually voted these bad guys into place because they think that it's super fun and exciting to watch. Like they've essentially sold their country to oligarchs to own the libs, and it's going to hurt. But they know what they're doing. I don't believe that any part of these men that are running these councils and discussing things and all of that are clueless. I believe they're all very clear as to what they're doing, and that's why it doesn't matter what we say to them, because they just turn it into sound bites. They crank it into other bits and pieces of disinformation. They will keep promoting and pushing this stuff forward to keep the people that follow them happy. This is all about it's a popularity contest. It no longer has anything to do with policy, and it's all about entertainment. So we're watching diplomacy and institutions being hollowed out by fascists that are using a sort of sick form of entertainment to keep the people at bay. So that's what's happening. They know precisely what they're doing. So no matter how you ask them, they don't care, because their plan is to own everything every last thing. They'd steal the wax out of their grandmother's ears. That's the kind of people we're dealing with.
I'd agree with you, and so one of the things that I like to bring up, and I did a recent thread on this, is in in Nazi Germany, the SA, the brown shirts, they played a huge role in the rise to power in 1930s Germany for Hitler. It was made up of a bunch of different people, but you had a lot of poor people who were unemployed, had nothing better to do. You had a lot of disaffected, angry young men, and angry young men are a special demographic that has always been an issue in any society. It also took a lot of disaffected veterans from the First World War, and they essentially formed up as a paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party for Hitler. And they would go around, they'd disrupt political opponents, they'd protest at rallies, they'd spread Nazi propaganda, they'd intimidate voters, even at the voting stations, just exactly like MAGA people started doing in this last election, standing outside the voting areas, wearing their red hats and spreading their propaganda. And once Hitler solidified his power, these people who were essentially useful idiots became a liability. And that culminated, as we know, in the Night of the Long Knives. And it should be a very chilling lesson to the people who are super Trump loyalists and have already been thrown into the bus when it comes to a number of things. And Trump's not even back into power yet. Like,
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say it's built on a cult of personality. The brown shirts were loyal to Hitler, seeing him as the ultimate authority and savior of Germany. MAGA, what's the difference? It's centered around Donald Trump as the figurehead with a strong focus on personal loyalty and his leadership. Militaristic images. The brown shirts were a uniformed paramilitary group with marches, rallies, and organized displays of power. And MAGA, not really paramilitary, but they still do military symbols, flags, tactical gear, organized mass rallies. They use political intimidation. They
Their
appeal to
stupid
populists.
red hat.
Yeah, their red hat. That is the brown shirt.
Brown shirt, red hat. Yeah.
The conspiratorial rhetoric, and also both brown shirts and MAGA undermine democracy at every turn. They are completely the same, in my opinion.
So, and another thing to note there too is that a lot of the red hats are people with legitimate economic gripes. Now, I know we're going to get into this a lot more, but there's a lot of people who can't get good jobs, whose regions where they live no longer have industry, and they want to point fingers. And to an extent, they are right that jobs have been shipped overseas and that America is doing worse off for the common man because their jobs no longer exist. And these people, they have a grievance. They're angry, and they're going towards what they think might help them. And if you don't know what you're talking about, and you don't know history, I can understand why some people would have voted this way, especially if they don't know how to get the real information. But we're seeing a dynamic similar that to what we saw in Nazi Germany as well. In Nazi Germany, Hitler was cozying up to all the major industrialists who were there, oligarchs of the time. We're seeing a similar thing going down right now within MAGA, where ultra wealthy individuals, corporate interests are wielding huge influences. Good example is Peter Thiel, as he's a tech mogul out of Silicon Valley. He's actively supported pretty much any authoritarian leading politician he can put himself with. He's trying to position himself as a kingmaker within the GOP, and he's pulled it off pretty well. His political philosophy, which really emphasizes questioning of democratic norms and stronger centralized power, has aligned him very closely with Trump in a lot of ways. But most importantly is his little pet rabbit, JD Vance. He's the primary beneficiary of Thiel's patronage. Thiel provided huge amounts of backing and funding to Vance's campaign, contributing literally millions of dollars through super PACs and leveraging his influence in Silicon Valley to rally support. If you look back, I'm not sure exactly how long, but not long, less than a year, you had JD Vance coming out and saying things like, Trump is America's Hitler. He was speaking out, but
He did.
he's now adopted a very populist nationalist platform that perfectly fits Thiel's ideals. And this pivot allowed him to secure the backing of Silicon Valley and the Republican base, which it's a unique bridge between tech oligarchs and populist voters, but it's dangerous as well. I'm sure you know, but our listeners probably also have all noticed. There's been a lot of tension within the MAGA Republican movement lately, especially involving Elon Musk and his support for H-1B visas. There's been a huge disparity between the ideological promises of MAGA leaders and Trump and the
It's
realities.
been Bannon versus Musk has been the whole thing, and that is where the rift exists. Bannon has a very different idea for MAGA, and Elon sees it as he purchased it. It's his presidency.
Yes, exactly. I would agree with you entirely there. And it's in the interests of the tech oligarchs to do this because, well, the H-1B visa program is supposed to be a program to attract highly skilled workers to the U.S. It doesn't really work out that way in the end. It really does create a system of dependency that leaves workers vulnerable to be exploited. Foreign workers are sponsored by a specific employer, and their ability to live and work in the U.S. is tied directly to their job. If a worker is terminated or they choose to leave, they'll be deported unless they can secure another job and sponsorship within a very short window. And
100%.
yeah, it grants employers leverage over their workers. The stakes for leaving, or even for just voicing grievances, is huge, and they can't really freely negotiate for better pay or working conditions without jeopardizing their immigration status. They're bound to their employers. There's all kinds of stories about employers subjecting to long hours, substandard wages, threats of job termination, and it just creates a cycle of vulnerability and dependence.
Well, we're living through a whole new gilded age. Billionaires and large corporations are the same as the major banks and all of that back in the late 1800s. So we're going through this again, and they're finding that it's to get the laws they need, they just buy their politicians. I mean, one thing that Robert Reich says, I don't know if you guys follow him, but he's a hero of mine, is he explains things. You have to get big money out of politics. You can't have Congress people with access to information and then allow them to trade stocks. These are all the kinds of corruption things that have been going on for a long time, but corruption has almost been legalized in the US. In a lot of ways, I still see Canada as being more democratic in a lot of senses, but in the US, everything seems to be for sale. And Elon bought it for $300 million in the purchase of X.
And then another 150 million in donations to Trump's campaigns. Was it? Is that the correct
Yeah,
number? Yeah,
it's around there. Yeah.
yeah. It's a lot of money to be spent. Like a truly huge amount. That's kind of hard to comprehend, considering what he was spending it for. Uh,
And if you really think about it, it's just a drop in the bucket to a billionaire. If he's worth $400 billion, we're talking 300 million. This is nothing to him, right?
Pocket
So,
change.
like, no human needs $1 billion. Like, that is absolutely the problem to start with. I mean, once you get to $1 billion, you should get a medal that says you won capitalism, and they should name a dog park after you. But you shouldn't get $1 more.
Fair enough. We got a couple hands again. I'm gonna bring Will up, and then Lexicon has something else to add. Will, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really good quote, Cranky Canuck. I always like that one myself. um, the but and you've got it exactly right. If people want to see what the model here is, it isn't directly Weimar Germany. The best model of what's going on here is the Gilded Age in America before Roosevelt broke up, the Sherman Antitrust Act and all the stuff that allowed uh, the world to become a bit more egalitarian and less dominated by oligarchs in America at that time. And they've essentially changed the campaign financing and rules in the United States such that they can concentrate wealth and generate another Gilded Age today, where the oligarchs get to define what they want, and the politicians are functionaries of them to do their bidding. And this is the real problem, but also the opportunity. Remember, right? The MAGA folks, the MAGAs are very much this H-1B visa thing is a good wedge to make sure that these guys can be brought down or fight with each other in the long term, because Elon Musk, David Sachs, Peter Thiel, no relation. Uh, they're what these guys are is they are rabid libertarians. Uh, they think the government need not exist and that corporations can do everything for them. And that aligns in the short term with the authoritarians they attempt to try to get elected. But longer term, they want to get rid of them too. And the MAGA folks who are supporting the authoritarians for the ignorant reasons that they normally do are going to be in direct conflict with the outcome of what the oligarchs get. But they've got no power to change it. So they'll probably just eat it and have to take it. But watch for when the Peter Hegseth uses the military to put down a MAGA rally at some point in the next 4 years, because it's probably coming.
Yeah,
I would agree,
and
yeah, or at very least the National Guard, right?
real quick, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off something Will was saying. These guys, Teal, Musk, and the others you named, you hit it right on the head. These guys are more of the libertarian tech bro crowd. In a natural world, they have nothing in common in terms of aligned interests with Trump's MAGA base. And we've already seen a little bit of the side effects of their butting heads over the H-1Bs. And oh boy, just wait till the changes to the H-1B system make it easier to get H-1Bs for some of the lower value jobs that they're currently denied for, like janitorial services and whatnot. Things that only really the hospitality industry seems to be able to get visas approved for. So, the Trump's base is really not going to like that. And, we've already seen some sparks flying on social media over Musk basically calling a decent chunk of the MAGA base functionally retarded. They coined the term subtards, which is so accurate for these folks. Broken clocks are right twice a day. But it's that's going to be the pressure point to divide them, and it's going to be interesting to see when these policies start trying to get put into effect, how Trump's base reacts.
I can kind of see it a little bit, because the whole Luigi situation sort of illuminated it and scared them, because it was the first time I'd ever seen on my feeds where people from the left and the right were like, yeah, screw that CEO. That was surprising. People with completely different ideologies that have been fighting over a culture war all got together to point at the CEO that, murders people with paperwork, to go get that guy. And so, yeah, there's something coming. So left and right has been the fight for a long time, but it looks like it's changing to up and down.
It
Well,
actually,
and Will touched on something, and this is what I wanted to expand on, that has gone on in the U.S. over the last 25 years. And it's the system that the oligarchy, which is, I guess, one way to describe it, but the moneyed interests is probably the more classical way to describe them, have crafted a tax code in the U.S. that is something that they are really the only ones that can utilize. The U.S. This what I'm about to say is probably going to piss some people off, but you need to hear me out to the end, and it's going to make a lot more sense then. The U.S. doesn't need to raise taxes on anybody. What it needs to do is eliminate loopholes and deductions that allow people like Donald Trump and similar 8, 9, and 10-figure earners to deduct themselves down into, the single-digit percentages or the low teens. You do that, and we no longer run a deficit. But what has gone on over the last 25, 30 years is an entire tax code that is designed for people that have a lot of money to be able to afford the vehicles to avoid paying a goddamn thing. And
Particularly the carried interest exclusion on income.
carried losses is, I think, what you're getting at. But also carried losses play into vehicles like the charitable remainder trust and many other tax avoidance vehicles that I
The funny thing about that too is that it's named the carried interest deduction, but it's exactly what you're describing. Even the name is a lie. It's disinfo. It's to allow them to write off losses and smooth their income over many years so that they don't have to pay taxes on future
and
earnings.
you're probably right. This is the crap I pay my accountant to do. But we have all of these avoidance vehicles built into our system that you can't explain to somebody easily. No, at least not on social media. Not hate to put it like this, but with the average level of financial literacy of the person walking the streets, explaining how something like a charitable remainder trust works is very difficult. It's easier to just get them to beat their chest and repeat, eat the rich, and feel like they're doing something and that'll ever make a difference, which it won't.
Or in our
Um,
case, axe the tax.
yeah, or axe the tax or something just completely ignorant that, when you actually understand how it works, you can just kind of laugh.
Absolutely. We've had Lexicon with their hand up for a little bit. Lexicon, if you could please go ahead. Please do keep it to a tight question or comment.
Sure. Well, this can go in a few directions. It's pretty interesting. When I go back to the historical situation, because you're talking about the Gilded Age, and it's also not too different from fascist corporatism, where this is the corporations are really what's the king of it all. But so Netflix had a series, just I don't know if it's still on. It wasn't that long ago, 6-part series on, I guess it was the rise and fall of Hitler or something. But what it showed you is how the ruling elites, Hindenburg and his buddies, they just sort of thought they would use Adolf Hitler, and they'd let him come and kind of implement some stuff that they needed, and they could keep control of him. And of course, the laugh was the other way. Because they could not control this tiger once they let him into place. But that series is quite interesting in showing how they really got themselves outfoxed, who's using whom. So I think that we see there are a lot of similarities. In fact, it's quite devastating to see that period in history. So at the same time, I'm really interested. Like, so what you're talking about can go in a couple of directions, and I'm always thinking about this time in our in the battle for Ukraine and the battle for sentiment in America, say, about in a week when and on a day when Mark Carney's just thrown his hat into the Canadian ring. But so bringing it back to this struggle for like what's so-called negotiations about the Ukraine conflict, so-called, and these ideas that we're going to solve, that America will come in and resolve this thing with the big man. I'm seeing that they're having a little trouble in the Middle East there. Uh, but I don't know if you want to take any of it in that direction and talk about how we enlighten a little bit or raise the level of understanding that no, when we're going in to exercise some leverage, they talk about leverage. Um, in the Ukraine area, and I see some people saying, even a Ukrainian commentator saying, "Well, America has leverage over Ukraine, but doesn't have any leverage over Putin." That's so much nonsense when we know all the instruments like the sanctions. Um, well, you can list a whole lot of areas of leadership, but it's NATO unity, it's armaments, of course, it's all kinds of financial instruments, OFAC, and all of this. There's tremendous leverage, and all Putin wants, of course, is for Trump to help them give up on this leverage, starting with all of these sanctions that don't make any difference, but please get rid of them. So I don't know if which directions. I mean, you take it in the direction you want to, but that's what I wanted to raise. That I'm bringing it back to Ukraine as well, in a really important time right now.
So I'm going to
Well,
say something that
go ahead.
that might not be a very popular opinion, but I honestly, truthfully believe that Donald Trump is an asset of Putin and that he has been compromised in some significant way. Everything he has done, his unwillingness to go ahead and, say anything bad about Russia, all his dealings, I don't think we're dealing with an actual legitimate American businessman here. I think we're dealing with somebody who's completely compromised by the FSB and the Kremlin.
100%. And I just love to speak to that for a sec, which is when Trump was elected 2 months ago, one of the first things that came out of the Kremlin and was on the news all day was naked pictures of Melania to send a message to Trump. And Putin even came out and called Trump very talented and even said some things on Russian networks along the lines of, you do our bidding because otherwise you know what happens. And there was even some threats towards Trump from Putin at that point. I've never heard anybody talk about it since, but that did actually happen. I'm sure we could dig that up. So
Oh yeah, and
absolutely,
Solovyov
let's
has said straight up that Trump is our guy. Like,
yes, like 100%. He's Trump has been went bankrupt in the late '80s, and all his money's been coming from Russia. I mean, even his kids have said, going, "Oh yeah, we do a ton of business in Russia." They've like Eric and the other Don, they've said that same thing. We know Trump is an asset. I mean, there was the whole PP tape. Let's remember this stuff. Like, there is so many parts to this puzzle that Trump is an asset of Putin. It's hard to even get your head around. And also, if America decides to invade Canada, take over Greenland, the Panama Canal, crush Mexico, who does this ultimately help? Us? No. This helps Putin. It takes the stress off of Putin and allows Putin to hammer Ukraine even harder. So this is part of the war, and it's finally at our front doorstep. And I'm just shocked that nobody's still. I'm fighting with people in real life to go, wake up. How come you don't know this? Like, people are tired, they're exhausted, they don't want to know anymore, but here they are. They're voting away their rights. And the part that blows my mind on that last election, we watched cops vote for a felon. We watched women vote away their rights. We watched church people vote for basically Satan. How have they done this? Disinformation. And the entire apparatus on the Democratic side blows my mind. I know enough. I'm just a guy on the internet, and I know that we have been fighting a disinformation war for 10 years, and now people are just starting to talk about it. Like, how can it be this behind the ball? It just makes me so angry.
and it should. And thank you for not spewing cuss words. I know when you're doing your own spaces, we get lots of that. But no, absolutely right. It's infuriating, and it's all part of the whole thing. Like when you were saying, remember the P tapes, remember all these things that Trump has done. Well, the Russians, who are at this point working in lockstep with Elon Musk to spread disinformation, especially through X.
Totally.
I just lost my train of thought there.
Well, he's
Yeah,
absolutely
it's
spewing it through
oh yeah,
X.
no, it's they're just dumping so much out there that people don't even know what to believe, and that's one of the strategies. They're just overwhelmed with that fire hose of bullcrap that we
And
talk about.
it's called flood the zone, and that is what they do, is they flood the zone with enough junk nobody can talk about anything, because the whole sinister point to propaganda at its core is to make people believe that they can't know anything. Well, I disagree with that. I do know what's happening. I do see what's going on, and I'm going to keep speaking truth to power no matter what. And more people have to do that. It can't just be 3 citizens. Everybody's got to wake up to this, because otherwise we're going to wind up like Russia, all beholden to oligarchs. And I mean, they're after us right now. Like, I started this space today. Like, they're going after Alberta, breaking that apart. We have people working within our own government that want to destroy us here in Canada. And people got to speak up to this. Enough with being polite. If it takes harsh language, then so be it. I will use as much of it as I can. I don't know what it's going to take, but man, it's time to stop being polite with people who want to destroy democracy.
I agree entirely. One of the amusing things, there's a Twitter account out there, Yukon Strong, that apparently represents people in the Yukon territories of Canada here. All 50 of them, and they're actually formerly were one of the Texas exit Twitter accounts just a couple of months ago. So they've gone from Texans and their warm water ports to being a Yukon territories secessionist movement on the same damn account.
So I just, that's funny you should mention that. So this afternoon I had one of the trolls come after me. It was a Texan speaking on asks me a question and goes, "What were Trudeau's accomplishments?" So I listed everything, and I just made a project out of this troll. It wasn't a bot. I'm pretty sure it was a human because you could tell how bad the language was. But yeah, so it's a Texas account that was all MAGA, but now all of a sudden it's now coming after Canadian interests. They're all coming after Canadian interests. I mean, there's still bots out there that are still all excited about Pierre visiting Kirkland Lake.
Oh yeah.
Like it's unbelievable. And yeah, like what you're saying, these accounts are being rebranded to come after Canada. 100%. That is absolutely happening. I see it too.
And for those of you who don't know, Kirkland Lake, Pierre Poilievre, who is the the conservative candidate running, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, who is embroiled in a mass scandal because he's potentially going to be the next prime minister, but he can't get a top secret security clearance and he refuses to. And we have evidence that India interfered in the CPC leadership race to help him win. And he had done a thing in Kirkland Lake. And tens of thousands of their residents on Twitter popped up saying, "Hey, yeah, I'm from Kirkland Lake, and he came here, and this is great." And it is a town of 7,000.
Yes, and also the messages from account to account were identical.
Yes, they were identical right across the board, but literally tens of thousands of supposed residents of Kirkland Lake all saying the exact
Yes.
same thing in a town of 7,000. And I've been to Kirkland Lake. Of those 7,000, 6,100 of them are over the age of 80.
they're not crushing it on X. Yeah, like to
Yeah,
say the
not at
least,
all.
right?
It's like you don't even get proper cell phone service in half the city. So it's just one of those things. And I see we've got James Healy up. James, please welcome to the conversation.
Hey, it's good to be here, and Cranky, it's good to hear you again. So yeah, Signal and Noise, good show.
Thanks.
And you got a fella who crushes commies with you, so it's great. Anyways, the reason I came up was you guys were talking about some just flooding the zone and everything, and the how we talk about what we think is the better way. It really is what counts, I think. And so it's not new to anybody, I don't think, but just to remind people of Ben Tallis's ideas and his article about them. And this is about kind of radical centrism or neo idealism. And it just really does, when you look at it, you can see it's like a common sense bundle of ideas about how to operate society so that it is, in fact, kind of a liberal democracy, meaning that people get to vote and control and have responsibility for their lives. The government has law and order, and we trade carefully with partners, and we respect the courts. We protect human freedom, and we make sure kids are educated. All these things are kind of written up into that and more. And so I just wanted to say that's some of the stuff that we have to talk about sometimes is what is it that really is the better deal here that we're pushing? Because we know what they're pushing, and it's kind of a klepto idiocracy.
I can agree with you. And the writings on Ben Tallis's writings on his radical centrism, and especially Czechia and Slovakia, and how he talks about the new center in Europe. I think that's something that was desperately needed here in North America as well. And I think that Canada might be a good place to start that. We're already used to having multiple parties here. We essentially have three big ones and arguably a couple smaller ones. We've got the Conservative Party of Canada, and then we've got the Liberal Party of Canada, which is kind of a centrist left. Then we've got the New Democratic Party, which is kind of a far left party. And
Actually, I want to
go ahead.
apologies. I believe the Liberals are center right, NDP is center left. The Cons are actually far right, and then the Greens are even further left than the NDP. We really don't have a far left party in Canada if we really wanted to breaking down black brass
In
tacks.
my opinion, the Conservative Party of Canada is still significantly left of the Democrats in the United States. So I refer to them as a left leaning.
Okay, all right, fair enough. It's hard to figure out where the center is.
It is but it's kind of all over the place, and it's that's actually an idea that I've had for a while now that I've rolled around in my head repeatedly, is starting a radical transparency party here in Canada. And well, I'd be happy to do the work to do it. I should never be an elected leader, because if I had been the president of the United States, Moscow would already be a glowing crater. Hell with the response to it. If it means everybody dies, then fucking everybody dies. It's better that everyone's dead than with Russia. So I really shouldn't be a leader. But that said, it's a situation where I was thinking it'd be great to just start a party where you're a candidate who will openly overshare everything. Like, here's what decisions I made, here's my voting record, here's why I chose to vote for each piece, here's my justifications, here is access to my transactions on my bank accounts, here's what I drive, here's where you can find my dick pics on the internet if you need to do that. Just open with everything so that there's absolutely nothing to hide, and have the party just exist on that same principle. Where
I love the idea, but before we even get there, we have to address the problem that we have with disinformation. And I was saying in one of my last spaces, we actually have to have consequences and accountability for free speech on the internet. And first, it needs to be wrestled away from oligarch control, however that happens. But second, we can't have any more algorithmic social media where we have an algorithm feeding you the same nonsense over and over and taking you down various pipelines. Because even if you're that candidate that's being as transparent as possible, it's going to get twisted and distorted all out of into a giant mess. And also, we need people that I would like to see people being fined for telling lies and actually hold our politicians to a much higher account and much higher level. If if a citizen's fined $100 for telling a couple of whoppers, I think a politician should eat like 5 or 10 grand, like right away, like dig right into their coffers, make them really cough up some money for going out and lying their faces off. Because that's the part that I never understood in all of this. I never believed that a politician could come out and lie the way they do. How do they do that? And then they'll lie. They'll lie about the color of the sky. They lie about the weather. They lie about everything. So we have to have consequences for politicians that lie. And I don't know how we start that, but that's what I'd want to do. And yes, I would love a politician that's honest and truthful. But until we can sort of fix the disinformation, it still won't help.
you got a point
My
there.
2 cents.
One of the things that is notable, that we've come into a situation where politicians have forgotten that through the course of history, death by angry mob is a natural cause of death for politicians. And unless we can give them
Right.
some consequences, you're right, there's no incentive for anything to change.
Okay, I got an idea. We're going to play Is the Politician Cake and Get Out the Guillotine. What do you think?
I actually have a friend who's building guillotines at the moment in Calgary, so that'd be be entertaining.
Is he cake? Slice. Oh, well, no, he wasn't.
And then here we are suddenly confused that Polyev actually is cake.
Well,
or a
it would
very
make a lot of sense. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm laughing too much.
No, it's
I'll
fine.
mute
It's fine.
myself.
So, all right, we've gotten a little bit off track here from where we intended to go. Let's get ourselves back on track a little bit. We went through, the oligarchs and, some of the history of the brown shirts, and we talked about antitrust laws, and we've been all over the place so far. What's the next part in the prepared bits that you had?
Well, I thought we were just going to stay on that
Oh, okay,
subject.
we
I didn't
can.
do much else than that.
We're
So
going down, but honestly, just
can we take up some hands? Anybody else want to jump up?
but we've certainly, well, we've had hands coming up. We can kind of take a look at some of the some more of the actual details that have led us to where we are right now. So, the 1930s, we looked at Germany, and how the reparations for World War I had crippled the economy of Germany, and how that was a real problem for the people, and it caused some very serious issues for them. And I think that what has led us to where we are right now, specifically, is the COVID-19 pandemic. It, for all that it was, it has led to the most significant wealth transfer in history, and it primarily benefited the billionaire class. Markets faltered,
Yes, it did.
lockdowns, supply chains disruptions, widespread unemployment, all kinds of fiscal stimulus measures to stabilize the economies. These were meant to support small business and the average worker, but it flowed into the pockets of the corporations and the ultra wealthy. And
And it also it supercharged disinformation, because it was unbelievable how much disinformation was shot out about the vaccine and its results. Like, I cannot believe how rabid people became over all of that. It was mind blowing, and it just created a lot of distrust across society as well. And this also bled into all our politics, how we deal with each other, and yeah, problematic at every level.
that led us to a very large issue in Canada with the trucker convoys, which,
Don't even get me
as
started.
we know, that was an issue. And there's the new Freedom Convoy that has. Well, first, before I get into the new one, the previous Freedom Convoy, 54% of the money coming in as donations to the Freedom Convoy here to oppose Justin Trudeau's government, essentially, came from Republican donors in the United States.
Yes, patriotic Texans were influencing our politics. If that's not enough to give you pause on what's going on in Canada, I don't know what will.
Exactly, and it's foreign money pouring its way out, and there is a new trucker protest. Now, I lost the link that I had here, but somebody's actually figured out that the website that the new trucker convoy is organizing under is owned by an American millionaire who is a huge supporter of Trump and the Republican Party, and they're trying to start another convoy.
No doubt. And this convoy is all about, they want a snap election now. So they're going to go out and have another giant temper tantrum and cause problems. And one of them was saying they're going to come to Toronto and they're going to bust up traffic and cause traffic jams. And I just say to them, we won't even notice.
Yeah, that's fair, and it's
you know and I think they can go have this temper tantrum. And a lot of these people, they don't recognize the fact that this is a cult. This is not a real political movement. These are lonely people that want to be right. They're conspiracy theorists, the tinfoil hat wearing crowd, and they want to hang around with the same ilk. So the convoy, when you hear people talk about Ottawa and that were part of the convoy, they're like, oh, it was a winter wonderland, it was wonderful. But I actually have a spreadsheet that has about 200 police incidences of attacks and problems with the citizens, and the misery that the Ottawa citizens went through. Like, how two people could have such a completely different understanding of the same event blows my mind. But there is only one part of that makes sense. They came in and they wanted to overthrow a democratically elected government and hang our prime minister. If that's not problematic to you, then nothing will be, because they were freaking out about stuff they didn't understand. They were getting their vaccine information from Alex Jones, a guy who was sued for $1 billion for telling lies about children getting shot up in schools. Like, these are the kinds of people we're dealing with. So if a millionaire from Texas is funding a website, maybe that should give these people pause before they roll up their trucks. I don't understand why they just can't have a space online and shit talk libs there, rather than having to get together and cause more public displays. And the part that was really funny about the original convoy was they really thought they were heroes going to Ottawa. They really thought the Canadian public loved them. But as it turns out, no, that wasn't true.
that
They were looked at as a pariah.
that stopped on the first day of the convoys there when
Yes.
truckers decided to urinate on the tomb of the unknown soldier and the
Oh,
Canadian War
yep.
Memorial.
Yep. How
It
disgusting.
was that infuriated me
Absolutely
so bad.
disgusting on
I
every
was
level.
5 seconds away from grabbing my shotgun and driving the 5 hours to Ottawa.
Well, I don't think. Well, that's where Cranky Canuck, my whole cartoon thing started. I've never been that mad. Something snapped in my brain, and I started doing this because I can't believe that disinformation led people to act so poorly in our country, and still are. And I'm still arguing with them to this day, and I will not stop. If there's anything I can do is crush disinformation and crush these ridiculous ideas that they have. The fact that they called Trudeau a dictator, they don't even understand what that means. A dictator doesn't resign and also doesn't have a minority government, and it's just nuts. Sorry, I digress. I tend to go down this path, but this is where I started. All of this is where I wanted to be more involved. But yeah, I understand that feeling deeply, Alex.
Oh yeah, and we've got Dryfly coming up too. Excellent. So yeah, I just pulled up some of the data here. So it was Thomas Siebel, who he's an American software billionaire, and he made a $90,000 donation to the convoy protests, and it was actually
Wow.
55.7% of the donations, not 54%. So
Well, that says it
that
all.
was our over 45,000 donations coming from the United States. Dryfly, please come on up.
Yeah, I love listening to you guys. I just want to tell you, as a guy who spent most of his life living in Minnesota and or near Buffalo, New York, I know how cranky you guys can be. I used to joke with friends of mine from down south who would say, "Oh, Canadians are wimps and they don't do anything." You say, "Try to skate in front of their goalie and take a whack at his pads and see how kind they are." He says, "You'll be pulling snow out of your nozzles for probably a better part of a half hour, you know." And yeah, I've had kids that played hockey and they played in tournaments with people from all over. And yeah, one of my grandson played in a tournament with a whole bunch of kids from up in Manitoba, Brandon, Manitoba. And oh boy, it was rough. It was really rough. So yeah, these guys are walking on thin ice if they piss you off. It takes a lot to piss off a Canadian, but when you do, it's kind of like a diesel engine. I mean, they just don't quit. So I have all the faith in the world that you guys are going to take care of matters. I have more faith in you, quite frankly, than I do in most of my other citizens here who talk a good talk, but really aren't. They're not all there. And I'll listen. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you've got the Americans who was the founding of sorry, let me clarify my thoughts here. The American founding myth, legend, whatever you want to call it, with the whole, overthrowing England, the Revolutionary War. You've got that as your sort of foundation of a country. It's very arguable that the foundation of Canada as a nation happened in 1914, and specifically in the Battle of Vimy Ridge, where four divisions of Canadians took a very, very highly strategic position under the fire of artillery the entire time, and just an absolutely horrendous battle where the Canadians just refused at all to give up, and they ended up winning this. And like they took out a German position. They killed something like 6 or 7 thousand, I think. I believe they imprisoned like 4,000, and I know it was around 3,600 Canadians killed and 7,000 wounded in that battle. But it kind of threw the entirety of the European theater for a loop, because they never expected the Canadians to take this at all. But the Canadians just got pissed and assaulted a position that they had no business assaulting until it was done. Dryfly, would you like to respond to that?
I think that's credible. The other point I would say was 1867, not your Confederation Day, but it's also because of the days that were happening in Washington when we were going through terrible, terrible turmoil post Civil War. Had tried to impeach a president, and then Grant was coming up, and there was a lot of Americans that were looking north and seeing you guys as being almost having gone in on the side of the South. That was never going to happen. Queen Victoria wouldn't have tolerated the English crown getting involved at all, and it would have taken the complete forces of the empire to really make a difference. But there were people in Washington who did it, and the British were smart enough to say, you know what? If we would give them some independence, just some autonomy, they're going to tie up America for 100 years. Well, it wasn't quite 100 years, but it certainly tied up America for a good 30. And no one like Grant who was the next president, was ever going to try to take on another fight ever after having been, in the Peninsula Campaign in Washington and been at Shiloh and Vicksburg and all the other things. He's like, we're done with that shit, for a while, because we had let enough blood, But yeah, I mean, to a great extent, the reason that the U.S. never, after the Civil War, looked north. Um, wasn't because we loved you so much, it was because we were just absolutely terrified at the thought of another civil war. And it would have been that bad or worse, with the British, with the empire on your side. So, I mean, I think you guys have really had it for a long time. I just wish Trudeau had had more smarts to have put money into the military, because he would have done two things. In your own military, not buying just U.S. goods, but building up your own. He would have helped to industrialize Canada, and it would have made for a much solider ally with NATO and the EU. I firmly believe that, and I've thought that since 2016. That was my biggest disappointment with Trudeau, and I'm not a Trudeau hater. As an American, I have no dog in that fight, but I think that was a blunder, and I think it's a blunder, by the way, in Germany too. At the same time, had they put money into the defense industry, they would have built up their economy. They would have brought, put money in people's pockets and made the Russians think twice. Listen.
I agree with you on that. It would be great if we had built up our, military more. But first, I'll say that never confuse a Canadian civility with weakness, because I believe that if we are invaded or something was to happen like that, you're going to have a lot of feral Canadians that live on both sides of the border that would just go apeshit overall. But for the most part, I don't think it's just Trudeau's fault on the military. It's just been something that we've never built up nearly as much, because America has been our ally since World War II. We've had these trade agreements. We're very much interconnected. All of our intelligence, our borders. There's just so much integration between U.S. and Canada. It's craziness. So there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of the differences are in our culture and who we are and who we identify as. But now that we're moving through this, I mean, we should be doing more like that to take care of ourselves and become more independent, because clearly allies can change. And what's happened with Donald Trump being reelected, and in our opinion, as we talked before earlier, was a decapitation strike to the leadership of the U.S. And this threatens our sovereignty and our well-being. And as much as people want to think our next election is about taxes, it's going to be about Canadian sovereignty. So that's what's coming up. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Dryfly.
I love it. I'm all for it, and I agree with you. I think the resistance from Canada would be off the charts. But again, I have lived in on the border. I mean, I have been so far north. I've been 12. I've driven 14 to 16 hours. I can't remember how long it took north into Canada to go fishing. So I went through all kinds of little towns like Thompson. I mean, not little towns, but small cities like Thompson, Manitoba, way the hell up. And then I went another 6 hours northwest of that, into village after village after village. These guys in Donald's sphere have no idea what they're talking about. They just have no idea. But I do. I know. I mean, I hung out a lot in places like Thunder Bay, and I mean, I tried to get my kid to go to the University of Manitoba, and the reason is because we are one of the few states in the United States that have equal reciprocity with Manitoba, meaning a kid in Manitoba can go to the University of Minnesota at the same cost as a kid from Minnesota. Kid in Minnesota can go to the University of Manitoba at the same cost as a kid from Manitoba. We have absolute total reciprocity, and that is just unheard of in America. Most states don't have reciprocity. We have reciprocity with Wisconsin, we have it with North Dakota, and we have it with Manitoba. And I'm telling you, if that doesn't tell you a lot about where our head is at, it tells you it tells you why most Americans do not understand. But yeah, you guys now have the Arctic. And 25, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the Arctic was like a backstop. No one was going to float a boat across the Arctic, really. They were going to fly over it, and we had NORAD for that. But now it's a whole nother world. So yeah, you guys got to watch your back door, and you got to watch the clowns down in Washington. You
Yep.
got work to do, and I'm all for you doing it. I 100% support it. I nearly immigrated to Canada back in the 80s. The only reason I didn't is because we knew we'd have family to take care of here, and we were the youngest, both my wife and I. But we thought real hard about it. I was backpacking up in Banff in Jasper, and I spent some time in Calgary with people who were in business. And I'm a chemical engineer, but a bioprocess chemical engineer. And so they were saying that, you don't, I know everyone's going to talk about Edmonton, but we think you would kill in the Okanagan, in that area because of all the processing of fruit and grain and such. But anyway, the point was is that I've looked at the North very differently than most Americans have, and we don't understand it. None of us do. We understand Mexico far better than we do.
Totally.
And so it'll be interesting to see. And the few of us who do pull for you guys, believe me, we're pulling for you big time, big time. So take care. Right. Listen.
There's some great Americans, and all I've got to say is there's a lot of counterparts in the U.S. that are great people, and I feel very badly for what they do not deserve what they are going to go through, and that includes you and all the other ones that see it from a perspective of truth and honesty. So thank you, sir.
And it's something that I want to add here too is absolutely the American people aren't our enemy. The
Not at all.
current the leader of the new president coming in is trying to make himself an enemy of Canada.
Yes, 100%.
But yeah, I was something to mention too. A lot of Americans, like, Canada doesn't have any guns. We're actually 5th in the world on firearm ownership.
Well, we still got a lot of guns. We have laws, and we don't jerk them off at night.
It amuses me because number one's the U.S. and then there's Yemen, and then there's Serbia and Montenegro, which is my background, which is hilarious, and then Canada. And so, yeah, I come from a very long line of highly armed folks.
There you are. Guns can be fun. We got hands. Just Helen?
Yeah, and I saw Mary had her hand up too. I'm not sure if it
I'm not sure who's first.
but just go ahead, just Helen.
Hey guys, I echo what you're saying in terms of, like, we love our American friends, and I'm feeling the love right back from most of them. So that's good. I'm just wondering about your take. Mark Carney announced today, and a lot of the signaling is that the Liberals are not going to be, they're going to abandon the carbon tax messaging, which I think my take is that that's really smart because it just cuts the knees off of Poilievre's message. And so much of the messaging there is just, clickbait and not rooted in any sort of reality. It appeals to truckers and whatever. But I'm just wondering about your take about, I don't know who's going to win the leadership. But I'm just wondering how you feel about the carbon tax thing.
I think Carney is a good choice, and also by taking that carbon tax out of the conversation, it does take the knees off. It kneecaps Pierre's carbon tax election. He won't have much to talk about because he's kissing Trump's butt all the time. At least he hasn't said so, but we know what he's about. There's problems. We're waiting for the foreign interference report to find out exactly what's going on. But yeah, Carney coming at this by doing that. And also, they made fun of Trudeau. Oh, he's a drama teacher. He's not so smart. Well, Carney is a world-class economist and another rich guy. So, like, how are they going to attack him as being radical left? He doesn't look that way to me. So they're going to have a real hard time painting the same picture of him as being Trudeau, because I think that's nuts. So, yes, I think that's a good plan. But the irony to the whole thing is, didn't Stephen Harper and the Conservatives bring in the carbon tax anyway to start with? And this was actually a sort of a good wit thing, and we were trying to make a step forward into the future. To me, yeah, so that's what should have happened. But yeah, I think to speak to you. Sorry, I got a little mixed up with my words. But yes, Helen, I think that's a great plan, and I think that's good. So we'll see what happens.
And one of the things is the carbon tax has become highly unpopular with the current financial situation of many in Canada. They see it as a way to reduce costs, and that's probably wise in the short term. Bringing it down, if axing the tax, the 3-word slogan Wonder Boy, that's the only thing he has to work on, great, go ahead, axe the tax. It's highly unpopular at the moment. You can always
I
bring something in
I
later.
know that, but there's no plan, down the road. They're saying carbon capture down the road. There's
Uh,
no technology that exists for that, so
well, there actually
I'm not
is a great
arguing for.
technology for that we are uniquely suited to use, actually, and that is mass tree planting.
There's a few other.
Oh, you know what? I love you because my grandfather. I love you for saying that. My grandfather had a forest nursery, and I'm on the East Coast, and my whole family is trees. So
Yeah, and
There,
it's a huge thing. Yeah, go ahead, Cranky.
I
Oh,
was
it
going to
wasn't me.
say real fast, there actually is technology that exists for direct carbon extraction from atmospheric gases. It's incredibly energy intensive right now. It may be a solution in 20 years, but it is not ready for deployment yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it honestly though, it's when it comes to industrial scale, it's very hard to compete with natural processes. Having plants grow for you to do carbon capture is absolutely massive, and that's one of the things. If you need quantity, you can't beat that. And just as to the comment on Carney, I think Carney is what we really need for our political ills here in Canada right now. He's uh, he's a very serious person. And a lot of the complaints have been about how unserious the leaders we have currently are, whether it be Polyev or Maxime Bernier for the People's Party, or just in general.
Folksy Doug Ford. Woo-hoo.
Yeah, exactly. And Carney
I'm the
is
nice criminal.
he's a centrist, and he is a very serious person with serious chops, and most importantly, I'd say, as far as we can tell so far, he is squeaky fucking clean, which is hugely important.
So, and the other thing to do with Carney is I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, but he worked for Harper in 2008 when the U.S. had their housing debacle implosion. And he did a whole lot of help. He offered a whole lot of help to the conservatives work through that. So he's been liked by conservatives from the past. And in fact, very conservative people like, Stephen Harper and his reformist folks. So I don't know how they're going to come at him as the fact that he's a radical leftist, because that would be super silly and ridiculous.
Yep,
However,
it's
I did see
absolutely
on the
not.
national, but speaking to the squeaky clean, I don't know if this is true. Maybe this is disinformation, but I saw something on the National Post, and we know that's a rag, but they're trying to now, from what I can tell, trying to line him up with Epstein and trying to make connections between Maxwell and him. And I saw that just starting a couple of days ago, which made me just roll my eyes. I'm like, really? This is where it's going to go immediately? So I think there is some desperation on their part to actually hurt the guy. So I don't know that for sure. I'm still working that out, but let's see how that unfolds. But for so far, he seems like a pretty serious guy, and I'm not seeing them come at him with anything else. So maybe that's just BS as well.
And he was the head of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. Show me someone else who's going to have chops like that that's going to run for office in Canada.
Yeah, no, that just doesn't exist. So I don't know how they're going to come at him, but yeah, he should scare them. I think Freeland comes with way too much baggage from the Trudeau years. I think that he will be a better choice. And it's just, I hope that there's just not enough time to demolish him with the media. And we all know that the mainstream media now is owned by billionaire oligarchs that are going to find one little thing wrong or something that looks questionable, and they're going to demolish him at every step. And that's what I'm going to fight back against as much as I can, because that's the part that's ruining all of it. There is not a single person on earth at like 50 years old that doesn't have some kind of something behind them. Like we've all lived lives. Now it's all captured, but nobody's perfect. And that's what we got to get over with our leaders. No one's perfect, but I'm with the leaders that don't lie every 2 sentences. So anyway,
Yeah,
I
no, it's
digress.
absolutely true, and it's And we do know that like there are some very, especially in Canada, the media is only owned by a couple of companies, and none of them are particularly left leaning.
Yeah, totally, exactly. So we've got our work cut out for us. I mean, it's going to be a long go, but I mean, I think ending the whole carbon tax thing is going to do a lot for liberals pulling themselves together. I just wish that the NDP didn't end their whole agreement with the liberals in such a tactless way. I thought that was damaging to all progressives. That didn't help. You would think that Jagmeet Singh would have been a little bit more, reasonable, but I guess he was trying to separate himself as being different from the conservatives and the liberals. But I think he just came off as an ass in the way that he ended all of that and caused all this. And I don't think that's going to help him. And the major problem we do have in Canada all the time is the vote splitting between liberals and NDP. If we consolidated it all into one giant progressive party, the cons would never win again. So it would be nice if the Liberals and the NDP worked towards perhaps only running one person in each riding that they think would win. Like, don't compete with each other everywhere. That would make a real difference if they actually work together. Because that would be the real way to defeat them, because we get vote split constantly. And that's what drives me crazy about politics in Canada. We are a progressive country. I think Trudeau was good for us in all of that because he, from the top down, he sort of made sense to a lot of us. But when people hear the same message enough times, they believe it. That's why advertising works. So yeah, we're at a strange place. But Canada to me is a progressive country. We're multicultural. We're not like the United States. We're quite different, and I hope people recognize that and choose wisely when the choice comes up, probably this June.
Helen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I agree with all of that, and you know what? She doesn't have a snowball chance in hell of ever winning anything. But how great is Elizabeth May? She goes there and she speaks her mind. Um,
I loved her takedown of Trump.
yeah, I love that too.
That made
I
me
love
happy.
that. But the other thing, just generally, is like I have a lot of American friends and I love them all dearly, but they don't understand that we're different. And it's so very nuanced that a lot of times I have a hard time explaining to them. Like I I used to be 30 years ago, I used to be a waitress, and I could tell when Americans walked in the restaurant. And I can't explain why, but there is a subtle difference. Um, and I think um, that that's adding to, well, you know, you're just like us. You can just be American. No,
There's a big part
we're,
of the Canadian
we're
identity, and I
different.
hate to say this because it sounds so ridiculously petty, but I know a lot of Canadians who view their Canadian identity as we're not fucking Americans,
We're not American. I know.
and very like militantly that, and
Yeah.
that's an undercurrent that there's a little bit of that in almost every Canadian. And
Yeah. And so can I just
yeah,
suggest
please.
for the next Christmas, everybody who's interested in Canada, just listen to Bob and Doug McKenzie's 12 Days of Christmas.
Yeah,
That should be our national anthem, I think.
it's a great plan. Dry-fi.
One of my favorites.
I want to
Strange Brew. If anybody wants to look that up, that's a lot of fun.
I want to speak to that last bit because she's right, but there's two reasons for that. One is that Americans truly do not understand Canadians. That is common in most parts of the world. Again, being a Minnesotan, we have a very, very different take. Very different take. Okay. Even people who grew up in southern Minnesota have had a lot of exposure to Canadians in Ontario, at least in Manitoba. Not so much if you're from someplace like South Carolina, Texas, Pennsylvania, etc. Okay, so when they say that, they have no idea But what they also don't know is that a lot of the border states, and I'm thinking especially Minnesota, parts of Montana, Washington State, New York, Vermont, all that whole area have much more in common with Canada than they do with, say, Texas, Louisiana. And I have that from my own personal experience. I went to a rugby tournament once at Mardi Gras in New Orleans when I was in college. And I was picking up games with people. Our team had gone down there, but I didn't make the final cut for the final lineup. So I was just down there picking up games, and I was playing with all sorts of teams. Okay, and I was in down on Bourbon Street, and we were drinking. And some people that I had knew from one of the teams I picked up with, they were from Ole Miss, from University of Mississippi, and we were talking a lot. And all of a sudden, some guys came up, and they started talking, and I could catch the accent right away. And I said, "So where are you guys from?" And they go, "Thunder Bay." I go, "Oh, well, I've played Thunder Bay before," because we'd gone in a tournament and played against Thunder Bay. What is it, Lakehead State or some Lakehead Provincial or whatever that university is you guys have in Thunder Bay. And they go, "Oh yeah, yeah." And they said, "Where are you from?" "University of Minnesota." I go, "Oh yeah, yeah." And we started talking, and these two guys from from Ole Miss just stopped and just watched us communicate. And we talked about hockey players we knew, because a lot of their hockey players came down and played in major universities in the United States, especially at places like Wisconsin and North Dakota. And being a Minnesota kid, we had mostly Minnesota players, so the rivalries were just insane between Minnesota and North Dakota and Minnesota and Wisconsin. And so I knew a lot of these guys. I knew their systems, I knew their programs, I knew all this. And then we talked about places I had camped, like Sleeping Giant Provincial Park and Quetico Provincial Park and all these different places. And they looked at me and they were shocked. "Well, I've been down to Itasca, which is in a state park in Minnesota, where the source of the Mississippi." And we just went back and forth, back and forth. And these two guys from Mississippi took a look at us and said, "You guys have more in common than I have in common with this kid from Minnesota." And I just look at him and go, "Well, duh." And I go, "Have you ever skated? Have you ever cross country skied? Have you winter camped? Have you ice fished? Okay. Have you done any of those things?" And then, of course, the answer was no. And I said, it's going to be that way when you have people who live in close proximity to each other and have economic interests, and the countries, regions of those countries are so closely economically tied. Years later, when I went into sales, I was calling on companies in Winnipeg. I was calling on companies in Thunder Bay. I was going even into Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta. Okay. Yeah, I didn't go down to Texas much. I went down to Texas only to cross over into the border to go to Mexico because we had plants that we were supporting down there. But it's something that people do not understand in this country. Now, I'm going to go to the other side of it. There are tons of Canadians who've lived in the US for 20, 30, 40 years. They have, for all practical purposes, become Americans, US, United States citizens, even if they haven't become citizens. Most of them have become citizens. But a lot of them, even if they've kept their Canadian citizenship, they've lived down here so long, they have, to a great extent, lost what made them Canadian. Those are what those people in South Carolina, Texas, and Southern California, Florida know when they say they know Canadians. They really don't know people from Ottawa, from Manitoba, from Winnipeg, from Moose Jaw or Flin Flon or any place like that. Okay, they do know people that have come from those places and lived in the States for 30, 40 years. So you're dealing with a situation that is completely homogenized. It's like the old Saturday Night Live skit of Bassomatic. I mean, they take people and you toss them in a blender, and they come out looking pretty much the same. Well, if you've lived in an American city for 30 years, you're going to be, for all practical purposes, American. And so that's really the problem with a lot of these mega peoples. They think they understand you all. They do not, because the people they are basing it off of, the few people they're basing it off of, have probably lived in the States, longer than some of the people here listening have been alive. And I'll listen. Thank you.
Or they're looking at our maple magas up here thinking that they're all the same. The ones up here that are waving American flags and don't know they live in Canada. Yeah, Americans think they're Canadians. Those are people that have got brain damage from looking at social media. So that's fooled a lot of them into thinking that we're the same, and we're not. And we don't need to be invaded. We don't need help. Let's keep things the way it has been, separate.
Yeah,
Thank
and if
you.
you want to renegotiate some trade deals, that's fine. Trump is complaining about that $120 billion a year trade deficit, and that deficit completely comes from us selling Alberta oil at roughly half the market price to the United States. And
Yep,
you want us to stop selling our oil for half price? Great, we can fix that trade deficit, no problem. We'll build a pipeline to the coast and we'll sell it to China. Like,
that's right.
Like it's absolutely nonsense what he's saying. Yeah, there's $120 billion trade deficit because we should sell you so much oil for cheap that we couldn't possibly take the same quantity of goods back. We just don't have enough people to use them.
That's right. But if we cut it off, they're going to be up Schitt's Creek because they're not going to get anything nearly as cheap.
Well, it's
So
a dangerous thing when you realize how much of the northern United States relies on Canadian energy, whether that be oil and
that's
gas
right.
or natural gas or electricity. Like it's
Building supplies.
yeah.
And
Well,
yep,
well, the lumber has been a big piece of controversy for a long time. The U.S. has no lack of their own lumber resources; it's just they can't produce it at the same low price that we do.
right.
So that's one of the things. And you know what? The softwood lumber has been an issue over and over and over again. And yeah, we do subsidize the lumber industry here, and I understand why they're complaining about it. But it's a far cry from let's have a fight over softwood lumber again than it is to say I'm going to tariff everything.
Absolutely.
And I see we got Zio up. Zio, welcome. It's good to see you.
Hi, thanks. It's good to be up.
Welcome.
So, on the topic of Canada and our trade imbalance, I think one of the things that we need to consider when evaluating whether or not there's a trade imbalance is not just the trade and flow of goods, but also of services. And when you take that into account, the US actually has a trade surplus with Canada, not a deficit. So, I think if you look at sort of all of the different pieces that make up the economy, yes, if you're only looking at what we're physically importing, we have a deficit with Canada. But if you're looking at what services Canada is buying from the U.S., we have a surplus. And I think the other thing to take into consideration here is that Trump is a master of kind of that lie, distract, and deflect tactic, right? I think a lot of this, we need, Canada to become the next state. We need to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. We need to take over the Panama Canal and Greenland. I think all of these are headline grabbing sort of things that Trump is doing, and all of that sort of to distract from a lot of the actual things that we should be paying attention to, like how. Basically every FANG company has contributed millions of dollars to Trump's inauguration fund for almost like a pay-to-play scheme where they're getting access to the president and potentially shaping policy because of these inaugural donations. Also, like the controversial picks for what's it called, the different cabinet members. I think this is a big distraction play from a lot of those picks and a lot of those problems. And I think it's a classic Trump move to kind of split up his opposition and distract them with other issues of chasing the most ridiculous Trump statements that he can then ignore while people, chase the red flag like they're the bulls, like, and he's a torero. Thanks.
I kind of wanted to say that for a while. That's been my read of just the insane bullshit that's been flowing forth from the man's mouth for the last couple of weeks. I don't think anybody with a fucking functional brain cell believes that we're going to invade Canada. And we're just going to forget about, just for a moment, the fact that the vast majority of Americans wouldn't stand for that. We're not going to buy Greenland or negotiate Greenland away. He's distracting from the dumpster fire that is his cabinet picks and quite a few campaign promises he's already having to walk back, and there's some fairly big ones. So, yeah, this is just distractive nonsense designed to get people looking the other way. And frankly, with his base, as stupid as a decent chunk of them are, it works. Um, and he's going to keep doing crap like this to distract them because it works. I think they've forgotten the admission from about a week and a half ago that grocery prices, those are actually going to be pretty hard. And housing is the housing market is complicated. Um, this is distractive bullshit to make sure they don't pay attention to that.
It's one of those things that I've looked at a fair bit too. Like they're talking about the price of eggs and milk, and I point out that you realize that H5N1 is just absolutely decimating poultry flocks and cow herds in the United States. Like just absolutely in a way that should be a giant under any sane, rational world. It would be so much bigger news than it is right now. And a lot of the MAGA folk just are like, no, that doesn't exist. It's a scam. It's the
Yeah,
next scamdemic. And I'm like,
they
are you insane?
they don't understand supply chains.
No, and they don't
And
understand, like, there's a very serious biological threat floating around. And it's a super dangerous thing, and it's impacting the food supply in a massive way. And yeah, they don't get it. I need eggs. Yeah, those come for chickens. Yeah, but I want eggs. They come from the grocery store, not the chickens. And it's just
and,
obscene.
and even milk, like that's number one, a gallon of milk really isn't that much more expensive than it was 5 years ago. It's not. It's like 20% more. And almost all of that increase in cost is due to the price of diesel. With dairy, you're not shipping that, tens of thousands of gallons at a time. These dairy tanker trucks hold something between the really big ones are about 10,000 gallons, but most of them are less than half of that size. And when diesel is as expensive as it is, and all the other costs associated with the trucking world have gotten to where they've gotten to, and there is a kind of and this is a really esoteric issue in trucking right now. We do have an issue with offshore dispatchers basically stealing money from truckers. That's a totally separate deep dive topic, but there's hundreds, probably thousands of these little Indian fly by night operations in India that are booking loads from shippers and then reselling them to truckers and taking 30%. But all of this crap is driving up prices. And nothing this man, there's no lever he has to control it. So you're going to see a lot more distractive bullshit out of Trump. Unless things start to actually go his way some way. And I'm, who knows? We'll see. He doesn't have to worry about getting reelected. So, but what Musk and Thiel have to worry about is keeping one of their boys in a driver's seat. And Peter Thiel, basically, from the moment JD Vance got up with him, and I think it was 2016, greased that man's rails and bought himself and manufactured himself a perfect little lapdog.
Oh yeah.
We got a hand from Skykiss.
Good evening, and it's great to have you guys here in co-hosting. Hi, Alex. I have missed your clear view of the way things really are. And Fella, you are just an awesome dude, and just really, um, I liked the track that you guys are discussing tonight, because this is so important. And thank you, Dryfly, for your experience in we've discussed about the whole Mississippi River corridor. I grew up in New Orleans, and not Minnesota, but it's really interesting to hear from perspectives from Canada and the near north of the United States. So, and also, just Helen, my grandfather was a builder, and um, so we used a lot of lumber, but you wouldn't find two people more loving of trees than my grandfather and myself. So I loved hearing about what the discussion about planting trees, and this is so much the case. It is better to have trees provide us their ecosystem services, which are many. A tree is just it's almost it's a spiritual thing for me. I have been drawing and painting trees for decades, and it's probably I would say it's my number one uh, subject as an artist, drawing and painting trees. One of the most important things we need to discuss, and this is both Americans and Canadians, is not taking out trees that are old growth. They are so important. Um, when we learn from Indigenous peoples here in the US and also in Canada, we just need to listen to how they discuss bodies of water and trees. They both do so much for us, for us humans. And just like you are discussing, I've been hearing, what Dryfly said, communicating with Canadians. Um, it's been a really interesting experience getting to know more Canadians than I ever did. Of course, in New Orleans, we had the Cajuns who settled from Canada into South Louisiana. But to get to know Canadians and know you're not like us, and some of us are not like us, we're just like, what? And we can't believe what's happening. It's just it's a nightmare. Being being good Americans and being good world citizens, and hearing what's coming out of this just this nonsense. So thank you very much for the discussion.
For sure.
It's
Yeah, no,
it's so eye-opening. And again, I'm glad to see you guys in the co-host seats. This is a real treat.
and New Orleans is one of those places that a lot of folks don't realize were settled by Canadians. The original French Canadians, the Acadiens, that became the Cajun. It's a huge influence there, especially culinarily. And
Big
yeah,
time.
you can go down to Bourbon Street and just slip slightly off and head to Verdi Mart and get yourself a poutine po' boy in New Orleans. Just it's a poutine on an entire loaf of French bread. It's
Sounds delicious.
oh yeah, no, it's great.
Well, I must add, it's gumbo time. I'm in Colorado now, and so I got to missing the food, and well, I'm a pretty decent cook. I can learn to, and so I got my cookbook and combined 3 different recipes and learned how to make gumbo.
Right on,
And so this time of year, it's gumbo time.
right on. Next up, we have Mary.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I just wanted to say I wanted to agree with Dryfly as far as it's not just Americans not understanding Canadians. I mean, Americans don't understand fellow Americans most of the time when it comes to throughout America. I have family where I would spend my summers and time in Center City, Philadelphia, and parts of Philadelphia, and then I would come back to more Mid Atlantic and down south, and it's a completely different world, you know. Just yeah, so it's just very different. And I also wanted to say I highly recommend anyone who is curious about the first impeachment was actually Dry Fly brought him up, Andrew Johnson, and he actually would have been impeached, but they chose not to go through with it in the Senate because they were afraid that it would affect the following election. But it is a very interesting story of how all of that played out, if anyone is interested in exactly everything that he did and how awful of a president he was. So if anyone is interested, it is a good history to learn about if for fellow Americans, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah, he was a terrible president.
Yes, he was, and it was it got a little chaotic during his presidency.
Didn't he even have duels with guns against people and all kinds of nonsense on the front lawn of your White House? Like this guy would throw ragers and all kinds of stuff. From what I understand, he was like a lunatic.
And
And yeah, they didn't have the
Stanton locked himself because he was trying to take him out of power, and so he literally locked himself in his office and barricaded the door. Yeah,
Yep.
it was bad. And so basically the impeachment ended up being where he didn't get impeached, but it was like, yeah, we're not going to impeach you, but you just do what we tell you from here on out, or else you will be impeached.
Well, what I learned from everything in America is that nobody will ever be convicted as a president for doing a bad thing. Like it's not possible for them to get the spine together to stand up to that. To not convict Trump for what he's done to you guys blows my mind. Like it's like I know it, like he's not responsible. I saw the J6 committee. I mean, I watched live on TV as people went running into the White House to murder Congress. Like that's not enough to get convicted. What? So it's all BS, and I'm sorry you guys are going through this.
All right. Thank you for the comment. Just Helen, I see you got your hand up as well.
Yeah. So first thing, Sky Kiss. I was lucky enough to be born with a family who had a farm, and when we moved to the farm from the farm when I was 7, I was lucky enough to not very far away um, live in a house surrounded by old growth hemlocks. And, you know, the animals were my best friends and I missed them and I cried a lot. But then the trees became, it sounds weird, trees became my friends. Um, but what I'm seeing a lot in Nova Scotia is that, you know, um, I used to see logging trucks go by with big, big logs, and now they're sticks. Now they're sticks. Now they look like branches. And so even here, our lumber industry is really stressed. That goes to forest management and whatever. But aside from that, what I wanted to say was that I always go back, and I know some of you have heard me say this before, so I won't belabor the point. Um, but always go back to Marsha McLuhan. The medium is the message. And what I'm trying to say is that, um, let's get off social media or don't, but let's build community again. Talk to your neighbors in really hushed tones. Sometimes it can just be a conversation. Because I think that's the only way we can change minds about um, what's right, doing the right thing. Um, whether it's supporting Ukraine, whether it's ecological stuff. It's just about those quiet conversations, and we've especially since COVID, but way before then, we've all been on social media and not so much the kitchen parties or not so much um, neighbor helping neighbor. It's we need those connections. They're so important. Um, yeah. Anyway,
That's
People
true.
that's
behave a
Internet
kind of
is
lot.
a
my dog's
poor
birthday.
substitute for in-person connection. That is certain.
100%.
Mary, hands back up.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I don't have neighbors. I live out in the country, so but I do have my big Ukrainian flag, and so I had on Christmas Eve we ordered pizzas because we do like a big family thing, and so the delivery guy when he delivered our pizzas, he got this huge smile on his face and he pointed and he's like, he said it with his accent and he was like, Ukraine. And I was like, yes, yes. And I said, like I could tell he was from somewhere in that area. And he said, I'm from Georgia. And he got this huge smile on his face and was so excited. I said, well, he said, you support? And I'm like, yes, of course. And he was so excited. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. Make sure like you have your flags, and also we've talked before about having the air raid sirens on your phone. I know not everyone does that. I do that. That way, when I'm out in public, um, if the air raid siren goes off, like other people can hear it. And I've gotten into conversations with so many people about, where they'll hear it and they're like, what is that? And I'm like, that is another, missile attack or drone attack going on in Ukraine. Like, and they're like, that's still going on or whatever. And then we started like an entire conversation. So just throwing that out there of ideas. So thanks, guys.
That's a cool idea. I like that a lot, and yeah, it keeps Ukraine in the discussion. And the one thing that is terrible about the whole Trump thing coming into play is it's distracting everybody from Ukraine and not paying attention to it, as it is the front line of what's going on with many of the problems in the world right now. But yeah, I really like your ideas there. That's wonderful.
It is my opinion that the war in Ukraine is the front line of the war for Western democracy. I
100%.
honestly believe that like if Ukraine falls, the rest of us are going, and
I couldn't agree more.
it's a disturbing thought, really. But it's like, what else are you gonna do? It's this is Russia is a bad actor, and it's for one of the first times in my lifetime, this is a war that is cut and dry. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of there's not even going to say not a lot. There's no moral ambiguity here. Russia.
Hey, look, even Mitch McConnell was behind, arming Ukraine to the teeth and giving them all their stuff. And I hate Mitch McConnell. You know what I mean? So because it was good because it was emptying out the old stuff and creating jobs in the U.S. and also helping out Ukraine. It was a win-win situation. And I don't agree with Republicans on anything, but one thing is that normal Republicans down there do see that as a positive thing. Calm Canuck, welcome. Come on up. You there?
Hello. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I like the thing about Ukraine and Ukraine being forgotten because it tied into something I was thinking about. It. I wondered, for one, if any of you have felt that you've seen more of a public reaction from Trudeau since he stepped down, and that he's talking about Gaza, he's talking about Ukraine, he's talking about the United States and the threat from there. And I thought, just given that the discussion is on disinformation, there's been a huge amount of I wouldn't say counter disinformation, of real information coming out of Canada from Trudeau, and also all of the firefighters that we've got down in California right now.
Despite
So I
Uh,
think
despite the
we're
threats,
countering the bullshit coming from the South.
to an extent, yeah, and it's one of those things where the American people, again, they're not our enemy. And I've seen some sentiment where some Canadians have been like, you know what, fuck them, let them do it themselves. And the answer to that is no. Canada,
No.
we sent people to Afghanistan and Iraq alongside the United States. We sent people for 9/11. We took in thousands of Americans on 9/11 from the the planes that got grounded in Newfoundland. There's actually an excellent musical called Come From Away that's all about that story. And like, Americans are our family. And that's why it's so damn hard. Like, I don't know many Canadians who don't view the United States as sort of a bigger brother. And that's why this particular moment is such a betrayal to a lot of us too. And
yeah.
it's really very, very upsetting.
How could
It's like
millions of
having your
them
best
vote for
friend
such
turn
a?
on you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Go ahead.
Oh, I think I did. It's like having your best friend turn on you. I mean, literally, more than half of my family members live in the United States, are American. Uh, Fully half of my friends are in the United States. And all but one of hundreds are behind Canada 100%. The other's a Trumper, but he's got his own assets.
Everybody has their issues.
Everybody has a couple of those in their family, it seems,
A
these days.
redeeming quality.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was disturbing to watch so many millions of Americans vote in favor of hurting other Americans and their neighbors. It was heartbreaking, sad. I mean, it took me a couple of weeks to even recover. I just couldn't believe that many people felt that way. Like, the first time Trump was elected, it was like, wow, that was foolish. Better not do that again. Electing him a second time is like, we love the pain or something, or we want damage. It's just, what he is. So to me, there's three types of Trump supporters. There's the absolute ignorant that have no idea what they're doing and are completely brainwashed. There's the ignorant, awful people, and though they just completely agree with everything he says. It makes them feel better about themselves. And then there's the third one, which know everything that's happening, know it'll benefit them, and they love it. Like, they know how it all works, and those are the ones I despise deeply. You can almost let the ones off the hook that have been damaged by the disinformation have quiet conversations with them, and I have had some success with some of the Trumpers, the ones that don't know any better. And if you ask them questions and if you're friendly, sometimes you can get them to see your point of view. But the ones that know what he is and voted for him and all of that, you're never going to change their mind. They're just horrible garbage people. So the masks are off. We know who the good ones are and who the bad ones are. And, I go after my trolls in such ways. I figure out the kinds of people they are. And sometimes they're just stupid. They just don't know any better. I don't hammer them. But the ones that know what they're doing, they're the ones I just lay into as hard as possible. So, anyway,
As well,
I
you should,
digress.
because that's, yeah,
Yeah,
you absolutely should. It's the correct response. Dry fly.
it's fight.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I was going to say fight fire with fire, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, fair enough. Dry fly, please go ahead.
The ones who know what they were doing, they're by far the most dangerous, because the minute Trump is dead, they're going to follow up with the next guy. So knowing who those people are is really an important thing. The ones who were suckered into it, they may be suckered again, but this was a phenomena that that hasn't happened in the U.S. in a very, very long time. I'm not sure it's ever happened actually to this extent. But the reality is that those people are are fresh meat, they could be persuaded. But the guys who knew what they were doing, who knew what he was about, and I have some in my family. I mean, there's my niece and her husband. They live in New York City. He's got connections to the real estate industry. He knew Trump's businesses. He supplied them. He got screwed by them. And yet they still voted for him. And the reason they voted for him is because they were pretty sure he was going to lower their taxes. Um, and I'm not going to say she's dead to me, but she was my goddaughter, and I really haven't been in touch with her in over 10 years as a result of that. It's just something that you just, I don't fight with them. I don't argue with them. I don't do anything. It's just that why would I want to spend my time? And what's really terrifying is even her mother has really cut back interaction. She keeps it very, very, I wouldn't say superficial, but trying to preserve the relationship with her granddaughters, her daughter's daughters, so that in the future, maybe something can be reclaimed. That story's been repeated all over the United States. It's everywhere.
100%.
It's everywhere. And I generally don't pick fights with Trumpers. I used to in the first iteration of Trump. I actually went out of my way to pick fights with them. Now I do not. But what I do is very much like what your earlier caller recommended is go local. So the day this election was decided, or even before it was being decided, when the returns were still coming in, I was working at a polling booth. I knocked doors for the Democratic Party, and then I was a poll watcher for the Democratic Party. And I was paired up with a Republican, two of them. One of them, she was an immigrant, and she was clueless. She was just absolutely, a Latino uh, 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 Republican who was there primarily for abortion, period. End of statement. No other reason. The guy that came in afterward, he'd lived in almost all the same places I'd lived. He'd lived in West Tennessee. He'd lived there about the same time, North Alabama. He had seen racism. And I asked him, I said, well, why don't you move down south? I mean, there's so many mega down there. He goes, I don't want to live with those people. And I just looked at him. I couldn't believe he said that. He said, you're working for the party who's delivering this guy, and you're telling me you don't even want to be around him? He goes, no, they're full of shit. And he goes, here's what you need to know is that this is a clown election. This is nothing's going to come out of this. This is not important. He says, you're going to get the regular Republicans to run the show just like they've always run the show, and they're going to run it wisely and efficiently. Trump has got no. And I just looked at him and he said, Trump doesn't even believe this stuff. He's going to be a very good president. You wait and see. And I just looked at him and said, what you see is what you get. I said, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. That's Maya Angelou. She was right then. She's right now. And you guys are going to own this. And then as the reports started coming out, and we were sitting there in this polling booth kind of listening to it, he kept looking back at me like wondering, like, holy shit, what have we done? Well, there's going to be quite a few of that. The thing is, they can't back.
Less than half the people in the hospital waiting room for.
Oh yeah. Well, they can't walk it back because they're going to be even persecuted harder than someone like me. Someone like me, they know I'm a Democrat, so they're going to just write me off as a lost cause. But the people who turn their back on him, who are inside the machine, oh boy, are they going to feel the wrath? It's going to be the wrath that Cheney feels. That Lightson, who I'm thinking of, the congressman from Michigan, but it's just going to be savage on those guys if they try to walk it back. It's why even Vance has gone to ground. They've all gone to ground and are trying to pretend like it didn't happen. And we all know how well that worked. That was what a lot of the conservatives did in Nazi Germany. Well, you can't walk it back. There's some things you just can't walk back. You either own or you fight. It's one or the other. And that's really where we're at. Now, to tie it all back in to what the person said about acting local, that's 100% accurate. The local people will be who will save you. And if you can't trust your neighbors because your neighbors are full of MAGA and you think some of them might rat you out or burn down your house or do something awful, there are still places you can go where you can find allies in your own local environment. So, for example, find out where the free clinics are. And there are free clinics all across America. There's one in my town. I wasn't even aware it was there. And we have an outstanding nonprofit healthcare operation in our part of the world. It's the Mayo Clinic, and yeah, it's nonprofit. You wouldn't think it is, but it's actually a nonprofit. The doctors make a shit ton of money, as do the managers, but the organization itself is not a for-profit organization like Humana or Health Partners or some of the others. But even with a good nonprofit in our backyard, there are free clinics that are working to provide care to people who fall through the cracks. That's one place. If you go there and you hang out, because I know some people who've worked there, they're going to be allied with you. Make friends with them. Get to know them. They will cover your back. They will give you heads up if something's going down. Talk to them, know them. The other place are food shelves. Food shelves are full of nonpartisan, lefty-leaning types. And I say nonpartisan, meaning they're not likely to be a Democrat or in your part of the world, a Labor Party, but they're still going to be lefty-leaning. They're not going to be MAGA. And if they see shit coming down and they like you and they're on your side, they will give you heads up. They will tell you what you need to do to be aware, to make sure you're not burned out, that you don't have a pogrom in your neighborhood. These are the things that are going to be really, really important. I don't think we're there yet, but it depends on how hard the pushback gets when there starts to be real resistance. That's when you find out how staunch they're willing to, how aggressively they're willing to go to maintain power. If they're willing to obey the law and do the regular things that we've always done, step down, you're not going to have a problem. You don't have to worry about it. But I'm not convinced at all that's what these Republicans are about. I think when we get to 2028, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that they win the election in the same way Russia won the election in Georgia. They're going to tamper. They're going to make it look like it's legal, but it's not going to be. If they still lose, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get really ugly. And we're not even talking about, or 2026, the interims. And then we're not even talking about 2028. By 2028, it's going to become really serious. If they have a bad time in 2026, they're going to double down in 2028. That's when you want to have those local allies. You want people, if for no other reason, give you heads up that something's happening and that you need to get your friends and family, get them out of the neighborhood. You may lose the house, but you're not going to lose your life, and they're not going to catch you. It sounds crazy to think that that could happen in America, but I lived in the Deep South in the 1970s, late 60s and 1970s, when the Klan was still active. We were northern carpetbaggers. My dad ran a factory, and we knew nothing about what was going on. The school district went through forced desegregation, and I'll say it's not integration, because integration would suggest that people actually live together in the same space. This was forced desegregation, where they were forced to occupy the same school. Okay, the violence was off the chart. We had literal cross burnings. I mean, real ones, where you had like 20-foot tall, like bridge crossing railroad ties, and then the regular 8 to 12-foot railroad ties crossing it. And they burned those in front of the school at night before the first day of school. And then they drove around town shooting shotguns, wearing the traditional white sheet Klan uniforms, shooting up in the air, trying to scare people not to go to school, and hoping that, if no one went to school, that desegregation would be called off. We got a warning from one of the locals who knew my dad, who said, "Do not go out this night. Keep inside. Stay out of sight. The Klan's going to be doing this." And he was not a fan of the Klan, but he was not going to challenge them. They're too dangerous. But he knew from his own channels that they were going to do this. This was going to happen. Sure as shit, it happened exactly like the guy said. We stayed inside, and I remember looking out the window of my bedroom, watching them drive up and down the street shooting shotguns. I mean, no one should have to go through that. But that was me as an eighth grader. Okay, as an eighth grader, that was my experience. I'm telling people it's not out of the realm of possibility we could see that same kind of thing again, or worse. The only thing that will save you is having connections and friends in the local community. You will not get that heads up online. That will not come from Twitter. It will not come from Facebook. It won't come from Blue Sky. You will only get it from a local letting you know that, yeah, you got to get your head down because shit's going down tonight. And so I'm recommending everybody at least think about reaching out. If you can't trust your neighbors 100%, then go to one of those other organizations and get to know people. It's shocking how many people do not know anyone in their town or their neighborhood or even outside of their family. Get to know people. Don't lecture them. Don't proselytize. Don't let it be known that you're one of them that's always, picking a fight and starting an argument, because you'll be shut off. But if you're polite and you're quiet and you listen, you can have really, really strong views and they're not going to hate you. By the way, it wasn't my dad who got the heads up. My dad was like me. He picked fights with everybody, arguments, hard nosed, tough. The person who called our family was a friend of my mother's, who called my mother and told her, keep your boys in. It is not the night for them to be out in that melee. And so you need to do that. And by the way, I would bet money that Ukrainians who went through the post-Soviet era, who went through Maidan, who saw it happen in their own backyard would say, oh, hell yeah, that's like 101. That's like the first day of class. You get to know your neighbors and you get to know who you can trust and not trust. Because in the world, like in the Baltics, I'm sure it's the same. Poland, I'm sure it's the same. The people who knew Lech Walesa, they would probably say exactly the same thing. Know your neighbors, know who you can trust, and listen to them, and then back them up when they need it. They will back you up when you need it, and I will listen. Thank you.
So Dryfly is a longtime prepper who's been in the the prepper and survivalist communities for decades. That is the best piece of advice you can possibly give.
That was
It's
great.
not one
Thank
you hear very often, but it is like that is the absolute most important piece of any advice you can have. Know your community, know the people, because even those that are politically motivated, they're not going to allow things to go bad for people they know. Personal connections are always going to work in your favor. So
Love that.
just as a heads up, we will be switching off to the Understanding Genocide segment shortly. But we have a few minutes left because we're going to delay till 8:15 because
And we have Karen.
Gina's running just slightly late, but we're going to do a hard cut at 8:15. So we have 10 minutes from now. Keep an eye on the clock. Go ahead, Karen.
I think Mary was next, to be fair.
Oh, thank you. Mary, please go ahead.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I just wanted to say, when you had mentioned the election, I honestly don't think it was so much of people voting for Trump. I think it was a lot of people who just didn't vote for Harris. And I'll probably get a lot of negativity for this, but that's my honest opinion. And when I would bring things up on MR about issues that I saw with the way that people were advocating for Harris in various ways, I would get shot down or yelled at or whatever. But that was a lot of stuff that I was hearing in my community. It wasn't necessarily that they were pro-Trump, a lot of them. They were just not happy with the course that our country was on. And that was who got elected. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Well, and that we saw that right in the data now that this went the way it went because, frankly, a lot of people actually didn't go vote. There was turnout issue in this one as well. So, yeah, it sucks. Karen.
Hello. Is my mic on? Yes, it is. Oh,
Yep.
good. Okay. Well, I was really, really upset yesterday when Speaker Mike Johnson removed Representative Mike Turner. He's a Republican from Ohio, from the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Okay? Although this man is Republican, he has been a staunch advocate for Ukraine. And he has been a key, in a Congress that is still dominated by Republicans. He has been a key to
bipartisan support for Ukraine, and the fact that this, and it just made me so angry because Mike Johnson, when Mike Johnson was finally persuaded to support funding for Ukraine, okay, way back, you know, and remember the effort that it took to get this funding bill through. Okay, that was last year. Mike Johnson mentioned that he had a son that was going to have a military career. I believe he was, I can't remember which branch, but he was in a military school. And he didn't want his son drawn into a war where Russia was a serious foe. Well, we can't count on Mike Johnson to make decisions that are going to be supportive of Ukraine and not supportive of Russia, because he's just too dominated by Trump and the MAGA people and their agenda, which is they still, for all their protests, they're still very much pro Russia, and it's just this is just one of a series. And so while I am a Democrat. I support many of. I'm a centrist Democrat. I support most Democrat policies, except for some on the far left. But this is a time for Democrats to get behind people, continue to get behind people who are bipartisan, Republicans who will. And we can see that there is a war within the Republican Party to remove anybody who has who wants to see beyond the MAGA viewpoint. And so, it's going to be a fight, but we need to support each other, in preserving our nation and preserving NATO. And one thing that really stood out to me in Trump and his tirade about Greenland, well, Denmark is a NATO country. Greenland, is Danish, territory. But the thing is, we're talking about one NATO country, the United States, trying to pressure another NATO country into giving up territory. And even they don't. and I think under this quest for Greenland, I think there was also a quest to undermine NATO, and that may be part of the Greenland agenda, is to underline our connections with NATO. And there is another point. And all this is, I'm just running a bunch of talking points together, and they're not totally related to each other because our time is limited. But I also wanted to throw out, do you remember how Mitch McConnell was behind Rusal attempting to invest in a Kentucky aluminum plant? And this was when Trump in 2018 lifted sanctions on Rusal. And, when Biden made his farewell speech, he warned about oligarchs, in America. Well, we're not just talking about American oligarchs. We're talking about Russian oligarchs trying to get into our country too. Now, this project came to nothing. Biden took office, sanctions came back, and this potential issue was delayed for 4 years. But now with Trump back, we're going to have to worry about sanctions being lifted and Russian investment in critical industries in the U.S. And this has got to stop. It will, So anyway, I am going. Excuse me. I don't know who had their mic
Sorry.
on, but anyway, I am going to end this, and I see Dryfly's hand up, and maybe he can comment more. There is one other thing I'll throw in. While face-to-face contact with your neighbors is important, it's also very important to have a presence online, because if you are in a blue minority in a red state, you may not be aware of just how many other people there are who agree with you. And it is a way to see who is on whose side. Frankly, I'm very pro internet, and I'm very pro, because we tend to, in real life, we tend to pigeonhole each other by where we live and what we do for a living and how old we are or how young we are. And when you're on the internet, it's your ideas that count, okay? And not how old or how young or, what color your skin
No,
is.
it's true,
It's
Karen.
your,
I just gotta cut you off here because we are at the 15-minute mark, and so I
okay,
do need to
yeah.
cut off right here as a hard cut. Prince, welcome. We'll be getting Understanding Genocide started out here.
Thank you for joining us on the radio. We look forward to seeing you again. Your audience. Your audience.